What if the first thing you said every morning wasn't "Good morning, but I will meet arrogant people today"? It sounds harsh, but Marcus Aurelius believed that reminding yourself of human nature first thing in the morning was not cynicism. It was clarity. The Stoic emperor wasn't trying to depress you. He was teaching you how to walk through a broken world without breaking yourself. In this video, we enter one of the most profound books ever written, not by a philosopher for an audience, but by a man writing to his own soul. And what he says can still change the way we live today. You are about to discover a daily discipline that can make your mind untouchable. Imagine waking up and before the sun rises, you already prepare for ingratitude, not because you're a pessimist, but because you want to master your own response. Marcus writes, "I shall meet the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, the deceitful, the envious, the unsocial. Not might. I shall." He's not surprised by human failure. He expects it. And in that expectation, he finds peace. Because what breaks us most often is not what people do. It's our belief that they shouldn't do it. We carry around an unconscious demand that life be fair, that people be kind, that the world match our vision of how it should be. And then we suffer. Marcus knew this. And instead of escaping into illusions, he chose to stand firm in reality. He says, "These people act as they do because they are ignorant of good and evil." He doesn't mean this as an insult. He means it literally. They haven't seen what he has seen. They haven't grasped that the good is beautiful and evil is ugly. But once you do see it, truly see it, you can't hate them. You can't be angry with them, because you realize they are part of the same whole as you. Not just by blood, but by spirit. Marcus says we are made for cooperation. Like hands, like eyelids, like rows of teeth. So to act against each other is to act against nature itself. And to be angry is to forget that the other person is not the enemy. Ignorance is. So why do we suffer when people fail us? The first reason is that we expect too much from others and too little from ourselves. We assume that the world owes us peace, and we forget that it's our responsibility to create peace inside. Marcus didn't deny the chaos outside, but he refused to let it govern the inside. He said, "Whatever this is that I am, it is a little flesh and breath, and the ruling part. The ruling part. That is what you must protect. That is what you must train." The second cause of suffering is distraction. He says, "Throw away thy books. No longer distract thyself." This line might shock you, coming from a philosopher, but Marcus is not attacking learning. He's attacking the temptation to escape into endless theory. Some people love ideas but avoid action. They seek answers in books but ignore the call to live those answers. He says, "Act as if thou wast now dying. Despise the flesh." Meaning, stop postponing discipline. Stop delaying clarity. You are not guaranteed another moment. This brings us to the third cause, forgetting who you are and what you are part of. Marcus reminds himself again and again, you are part of the universe, an efflux of the same intelligence that governs the stars. And if the whole is wise, then whatever happens is either part of its plan or its permission. And you, as a part, must accept what the whole brings. This idea is hard for us today. We're taught to chase control, to plan, to strive, to conquer. But Marcus offers another path, the path of inner surrender. Not to weakness, but to wisdom. He says, "Let these principles be fixed opinions. Let them be enough for you. Cast away the thirst after books, that you may not die murmuring, but thankful to the gods. Still, we delay. And Marcus knew this about himself. He writes, "Remember how long thou hast been putting off these things, how many chances you've received. And still you wait, but you don't have forever. Life is passing. The clouds of your mind will not clear unless you make the effort. So what should you do?" He says, "Every moment think steadily as a Roman and a man," meaning live with dignity, with justice, with affection. Do each act as if it were your last. That is the Stoic way. You're not here to float. You're here to stand, not to complain about fate, but to align with it, not to argue with others, but to master yourself. He lists the qualities we must remove: carelessness, hypocrisy, self-love, discontent with what's been given. If we shed these, he says, we can live a life which flows in quiet and is like the existence of the gods. But that's not what we often choose. He speaks to his own soul and says, "Do wrong to thyself. Do wrong to thyself." Why? Because his soul still seeks praise from others, still places happiness in other people's approval. How many of us do the same? We build our peace on opinions that can change in a moment, and then we wonder why we feel shaken. He asks, do the things that fall upon you distract you? Then give yourself time. Stop being whirled around. Cease running without purpose. He criticizes those who are active but aimless. They exhaust themselves. But for what? He says, through not observing what is in the mind of another. A man is seldom unhappy. But those who do not observe their own minds must be. That line is a dagger of truth. We think watching others will bring understanding. But wisdom begins within. Clarity starts by examining the self. He reminds himself again, what is the nature of the whole? What is my nature? How do I fit within the universe? And who can stop me from doing what accords with that nature? This is radical responsibility. He does not place blame on the gods, or the crowd, or the state. He asks only that he live with reason, that he remain a servant of the divine within, and that he never forget death may come at any moment. So regulate every act and thought accordingly. This is the Stoic preparation. Not fear, not control, but conscious alignment. With each breath, remember you are only here now. The past is gone. The future is unknowable. But now, this is yours. So how do we live like this? How do we walk through a chaotic world without losing our clarity? Marcus gives us a simple but demanding answer. Begin by regulating every act and thought as if you were about to die. That doesn't mean becoming dark or gloomy. It means becoming fully alive. When you remember that you are mortal, you stop wasting time. You stop chasing what doesn't matter. You stop postponing the inner work. Every action must be done with intention. Every movement must have a purpose. He says even the smallest things must be done with reference to an end. Not just results, but meaning. To live without purpose is to live like a leaf in the wind. You might move, you might flutter, but you are not flying. You are being thrown. So what should guide you? One thing and only one: philosophy. Not the philosophy of debate, but of decision. Not clever arguments, but clear action. Marcus defines it as keeping your inner demon, your rational soul, free from violence, unharmed, superior to pain and pleasure, doing nothing without aim, never lying, never pretending, never waiting on others to approve of you or direct your path. Instead, philosophy teaches you to accept all that happens as coming from the same place you came from. This is what makes you calm. This is what makes you powerful. But the world will try to pull you away. The crowd will tempt you to react. Pain will demand your surrender. Pleasure will seduce your reason. Fame will whisper sweet nothings. And fortune will change its face without warning. So Marcus gives you a discipline to return to. He says, the soul of man does violence to itself when it becomes a tumor on the universe. That happens every time you rage at what happens. Every time you reject your fate. You separate yourself from nature and become an infection in the body of the whole. The soul also does violence to itself when it turns away from others, when it seeks revenge, or acts with the intent to harm, or moves in hatred. That is a fracture in the unity we are meant to protect. It violates itself again when it is overpowered by pleasure or pain. Every time we let emotion dominate reason, we break ourselves. It violates itself when it plays a part, when it lies, when it acts for show. And finally, it does violence to itself when it acts without aim, when it moves without intention, when it rushes without reflecting. These are the 5 self-wounds, and if we heal them, we regain our inner power. Now let's go deeper. Marcus doesn't only offer theory, he gives examples that echo through the centuries. One of the most powerful comes from Theophrastus. He compares 2 kinds of moral failure, one caused by anger, the other by desire. Anger, he says, is a kind of pain, a contraction, a breaking from reason. But desire, that is worse, because it is chosen. It is the surrender to pleasure. It is the willingness to be ruled. To be angry may be to react to harm, but to indulge desire is to become the harm. It makes us soft, intemperate, more womanish, he says, not as a criticism of women, but of men who lack inner firmness. And what is his solution? Self-mastery, clarity, detachment from the things that pass away. He says, all things disappear. Bodies decay. Memories fade. Pleasures wither. Pain vanishes. And reputation is a vapor. He urges us to see clearly the nature of the things that tempt or terrify us. To ask, is this really good? Is this really bad? Or is it just opinion? Because when we look with our rational mind, we see that death is not evil. Pain is not evil. Dishonor is not evil. None of these things make us worse. So how can they ruin our lives? What ruins us is false judgment. What breaks us is craving or fearing what we cannot control. And what saves us is attention to the demon within, that divine reason that is always present, if we only choose to hear it. Marcus urges us to stay there, to stop wandering, to stop looking into other people's minds, to stop guessing what others are thinking. That is a path to misery, because we are not here to control others. We are here to master ourselves. This is where he goes beyond common advice. He says, even if you were to live 3, 1 years or 30, you would still lose only the life you live now, because you cannot lose what you do not have. The past is gone. The future does not yet exist. So the present, this instant, is all that you can be deprived of. That is why we must treasure it. That is why we must act now. And so, when you feel fear, Marcus says, remember death is natural. It is not a curse. It is not a punishment. It is a change of form, a return of the elements. And if the universe has no fear of change, why should we? What is death? if not a part of the same nature that gave us life. He even goes further. If the gods exist, they will do no harm. If they don't, then the universe still flows by nature. Either way, there is nothing to fear, for pain cannot touch the soul unless the soul agrees. And fame cannot raise the dead, and wealth cannot buy back 1 second of time. All is opinion. That is what Monimus the Cynic said. And Marcus repeats it not to dismiss reality, but to remind us that our interpretation defines our world. If we judge something to be evil, we suffer. If we judge it to be indifferent, we are free. So here is the call. Stop postponing your peace. You have everything you need already. The discipline of action, the clarity of purpose, the reason that lights your way. But it must be used. Now, today, this moment. Start by asking one question before every act. Is this worthy of my soul? If the answer is no, stop. If the answer is yes, proceed with joy. And when the world throws chaos at you, say to yourself, I am part of the whole. I cannot be injured by ignorance. I will not wound myself, and I will not forget who I am. You were not born to be ruled by fear. You were born to master the ruling part within. That is the gift of Marcus Aurelius. And now it is your move. There was a moment, one we're never taught in history class. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of the legions, master of the known world, alone in a military outpost, in the freezing winds of Carnuntum, far from comfort, far from ceremony, no gold, no marble halls, just a tent, his breath visible in the cold morning air. And in that solitude, he writes, not for praise, not for power, but to save his soul. This was a man who held the fate of nations in his hands. And yet, his deepest battle was not with enemies outside Rome. It was within the war against anger, against pride, against fear, against distraction, against the temptation to abandon the principles he held sacred. He writes to himself, do wrong to thyself. Do wrong to thyself, my soul. You can hear the weight, the frustration, the honesty. He knows he has wasted moments, sought validation, been distracted. And now, the time is short. He speaks like a man facing the mirror. No more delay, no more pretending, no more hiding behind philosophy. Live it, or die without it. This moment is not dramatic in the way we expect of emperors. No trumpet, no victory speech, just a man confessing to himself the truth. I have not honored my soul, and I will not get this chance again. How many of us have felt this? The creeping sense that we are not living as we should, that our life is drifting, that we've become strangers to ourselves. We wake up, we scroll, we rush, we react, but we do not lead ourselves. And then we feel the quiet ache of lost time. But Marcus does not drown in regret. He turns, he confronts, he reminds himself, what is this body? Flesh, breath, a network of veins and nerves. What is the soul? The ruling part. And what is the purpose? To live in harmony with nature, to act with justice, to speak with truth, to do each act as if it were the last. There is no self-pity here, only self-command. He says, stop being pulled like a puppet. No more letting external things decide your peace. No more shrinking from the future. This is it. This breath. This hour. This is life. Use it. He writes, Give thyself time to learn something new and good. That sounds so simple, but in a world of noise, it's revolutionary. Time to learn, time to grow, time to return to yourself. Marcus was surrounded by people who bowed to him, feared him, obeyed him, but none of them could save him from himself. Only he could do that. Only he could choose to honor the demon within. That quiet voice that never shouts, but always knows. In the chaos of command, he chose silence. In the roar of battle, he chose reflection. In the face of death, he chose calm. This is what makes him great. Not the empire, but the effort to rule his own mind. You may not be an emperor, but your inner war is no less real. You face temptation, anger, resentment, distraction, and your peace depends on the same discipline. You must remember, the soul wounds itself when it lies, when it acts without aim, when it moves without reason, when it chases pleasure and flees pain, when it turns away from others in hatred, when it rejects what comes from life. But you can stop this at any moment. You can decide, right now, not to be ruled by what happens, but to respond from the highest part of you, to honor the nature you were made to reflect. Marcus says, "Nothing is more wretched than the man who pries into the minds of others and forgets his own." We do this all the time, comparing, judging, guessing what others think. Meanwhile, our own mind rots from neglect. So come back. Come back to the only place where clarity lives. Inside, not in opinion, not in fame, not in status, but in reason, in purpose, in simplicity. He says, the time of life is a point. The substance is in a flux. The soul is a whirl. Fame is a vapor. Life is a stranger's sojourn. And after fame is oblivion. And yet, none of that is tragic. It is only tragic if we ignore it. But if we accept it fully, we become free. Free to live. Free to act. Free to love without fear. And when the time comes, when the breath slows and the body weakens, we will not cling or cry. We will say, "I have followed reason. I have accepted my portion. I have done my part. And now I return to the source." That is the power of Marcus Aurelius. That is the legacy of a man who lived not for applause, but for alignment. And now, that choice belongs to you. So what have we learned from the emperor who ruled the greatest empire in the world, yet bowed to something greater than himself? First, we begin each day with clear eyes, not expecting people to be perfect, not wishing the world to be soft, but reminding ourselves we will meet the arrogant, the ungrateful, the deceitful, and we will not be surprised. We will not be shaken, because we understand they are ignorant of what is good and evil, and our task is not to react, but to remain. Second, we remember what we are: a body that passes, a breath that returns, and a soul, the ruling part, that must not be enslaved. We cannot afford distraction. We cannot afford delay. Philosophy must be lived now. Third, we align with the whole. Whatever happens, happens within nature. And what happens to us is part of that whole. We do not resist it, or we do not curse it. We accept. We act. We adapt. And in that, we find peace. Fourth, we remove the self-violence. We stop lying. Stop acting without aim. Stop turning from others in hate. Stop letting pleasure or pain rule us. We stop making ourselves strangers to our own mind. And we return to reason. Fifth, we face death, not with fear, but with reverence. It is not the end. It is a change, a return, a dissolving of parts into the whole. And if nature does not fear it, neither should we. Marcus shows us, nothing that does not make us worse is evil, and nothing that fades was ever truly ours. All is opinion, so choose your judgments well, because they shape your world. You do not need more time. You need more presence. You do not need more praise. You need more purpose. You do not need a perfect life. You need a willing soul. So now the question is not what will you learn? It is what will you live? Start today. Begin the morning by preparing your mind. Write. Reflect. Say to yourself, I will meet challenges today, but I will not break, because I am not here to win approval. I am here to follow reason. Before each action, ask, is this worthy of the soul within me? If it is not, don't do it. If it is, do it completely. Make your bed as if it were the last act of your life. Speak to your child as if you will not see them again. Work with hands steady and mind clear. Do not be pulled like a puppet by moods or headlines or gossip. Stand where you are and return to your own mind. That is the citadel. That is where philosophy lives. That is where freedom begins. If you live this way, even for one day, you will feel it. A stillness, a dignity, a quiet power that no one can give you and no one can take away. That is the legacy of Marcus Aurelius. That is the path you are now called to walk. But the journey doesn't end here, because now you have stood your ground against chaos. But another storm is coming, one that touches every human soul. It is not anger, not desire, not distraction. It is something more final, more invisible, and more urgent. In the next episode, we face what every man fears: impermanence. We confront the fact that everything we love will pass. And we ask, how do we live in a world of constant loss? How do we love without clinging? How do we act with virtue, knowing all is dust? Join us next time, because when you learn to face death, you finally learn how to live.